Greetings, dear viewers and listeners all over the world, my colleagues in the studio and our guests. This is another edition of our General Management, Development and Leadership one-on-one conversation hosted by my colleague Devesh Mothilall and his co-host George Mutendadzamera. We are looking forward to discussing everything digital from management and leadership perspective. I will hand over to you, Devesh, to greet our viewers, listeners, and welcome our guests, and of course, our brother, your co-host, George Mutendadzamera. Over to you.
Thank you, Sam, and welcome again to the listeners and viewers to COMETSA Radio Worldwide, and also we on COMETSA TV as well. I'm your host, as Sam said, my name is Devesh Mothilall, and our show today is Management and Leadership 101, where through the insight and experience of our guests, we share specific sectoral management and leadership knowledge, opportunities, and challenges. COMETSA Radio Worldwide is a business, entrepreneurship, and professional management services 24/7 internet streaming radio as well as television station. We're broadcasting from South Africa to the rest of the world. And through our shows, we instill the concept of what we call the idea, where the I, we inform and entertain, we develop and educate, we empower and support, and we associate as well as network. That's the idea. So as I said, I'm your host, Devesh Mothilall. I'm an engineer, a mentor, and also been involved in both private sector and government industries for in excess of 20 years. I'm an electrical engineer, UCT, but I've also done masters in technology management. I've had a keen interest in sustainable development, and in that space, you find that there's always this cross-cutting sectoral approach where the usual approaches that we used to as engineers is not the same anymore. My co-host today is Mr. George Mutendadzamera, and I'll just hand over to him so that he could introduce himself. Over to you, George.
Thank you, Devesh, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in. It's always a great opportunity to share with you developments, and as you know, we always bring in the best of the very best to talk to us, to tell us what's going on. And today we are going to be focusing on the telecom sector. I'm the CEO of Vola Unlock Consulting. We're a business, executive, and life coaching outfit based here in Johannesburg. But as you know, with the electronic platforms right now, we coach anyone from anywhere across the globe. And I'm originally a lawyer, I keep saying to people, and I've migrated out of law into coaching, and I love every bit of coaching. But also, I'm very keen on sharing knowledge, information, and hence my involvement in COMETSA. I think it's something that has been quite revolutionary in streaming to your homes and get you up to speed. So sit back, relax, and spend some time with us. I'm sure you will enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. As George had mentioned, today on our show, we will be looking at a part of the telecommunications and digital sector. And our very special guest is Mr. Bora Varliyagci. Bora is the CEO of a company called Digitalthings. And before establishing Digitalthings, he was the head of Africa for digital infrastructure practice within Mott MacDonald, which is a multinational engineering consultancy. He's had in excess of 21 years of international experience in the telecoms industry, working in Asia, Central, Southern and Eastern Europe, as well as in the Middle East and Africa. He's had substantial experience working as well in South Africa, predominantly helping government as well as private sector carve out the roadmaps towards digital migration of various services and technologies. His understanding of African telecommunications market and the background in strategy and negotiations, combined with his commercial experience, bring a unique support and value to all of his clients, and hopefully we can share some of that with our listeners and viewers. Bora also thrives to contribute the expansion of the broadband footprint globally and digital inclusion as he views that as a human right. Welcome to my guest. And now more than ever, telecommunications and the digital sector has become more important. If you look at the impacts of COVID and especially the need of most people, businesses having to work from home or from remote locations, the telecommunications and the digital sector has been under tremendous pressure. And of course, it leads to some opportunities. I'll just hand over then to Bora so that he can give us a little bit more about himself. And then let's talk about this digital divide that also seems to be hampering the economies and the development opportunities in Africa as well as in South Africa. Over to you, Bora.
Thank you very much, Devesh. And first of all, I would like to thank you for having me tonight on this special show. I'm really, truly excited to join you discussing digital trends, telecommunications, and as you mentioned, I mean, the importance, growing importance of it in the new era that we are, new digital era that we are living through. About myself, I mean, you said it all from a background point of view. I'm originally from Turkey. Just after graduating from university, started traveling early stages of the mobile communication networks, deployed mobile communication networks all around the world: Philippines, Indonesia, Gabon, India, France. I mean, you name it. So have been around for a while and traveled a bit. I think conducted business in excess of 50 countries. I've been in South Africa for past now almost 12 years, and really enjoying enough. I can call myself, South African, given that I spend most of my adult life in this country from that angle. And I'll come to your point in terms of the importance of digital developments as well as the gaps that the COVID pandemic has underlined and highlighted in recent times. I guess, you're right. We are doing many things that we used to do in physical environments through the virtual digital engagements nowadays. That goes all the way from working home, studying from home, shopping from home, entertaining and socializing from home. So surely, COVID has changed the life almost overnight, right? That is something that gave the old style of doing things a disruption. And that disruption came very fast. This disruption came very impactful as well. Yet, while most of us on this call probably are lucky enough to leverage from some of the benefits of digital communication and infrastructure underlying that, unfortunately, it is not true for still a big part of the population in Africa. Hence, the COVID-19 also highlighted the digital divide on the continent and the importance of bridging it as soon as possible. At the end of the day, if you think about it, even for people who are connected, the transition is not that simple. Connectivity and having access to video calls like this to conduct our business, to study online, is just one part of it. But I'll start from that and I'll go deeper into this. But at the end of the day, just having ability to have a video call or connectivity is not really sorting out the problem. Because even from education point of view, if you think about recent past, there have been a big divide between students who are still connected, but from an education institution point of view, not all of the schools were completely prepared to transition to online education, because it requires obviously technical skills to use the tools, your MS Teams or Skypes or other platforms, Zooms and all those, using those tools effectively and efficiently to communicate and pass the message on a digital environment, but also soft skills. I think that's quite important as well, because when you are not in a room, in a physical environment with your students or with your colleagues, even from a business engagement and negotiations point of view, you really need to cater for that element of distance and virtuality. You are not able to read body languages. You are not able to understand and see if your audience gets you and follows you, and hence pose and question those things. So, I mean, even for a few lucky who has access to these tools and connectivity, still, I don't think it sorts out the entire problem of digital transition overnight. As much as, we moved to this, or we are pushed to move this overnight, there is still a lot of progress to be done. And that comes with both improving digital literacy and technical skills, particularly, applications like education, training. It's critical, and that is still a way to go, and we are still at the beginning of that journey, in my opinion. And after all, also enabling those content and having platforms, those are quite essential to conduct things virtually, still developing. And again, except few schools, private schools, and this and that, the majority of the schools do not have those luxuries. Then I will come to the gap, digital divide that we are looking at, because if we look into the access to connectivity on the continent, still half the population remains unconnected. We connected half the population, but we are still talking about 500 million people on the continent who do not have connectivity. And besides that, if you look into the internet usage, only 1/3 or even less than 1/3 of the population have access to internet or active internet users. So that gives you the 2/3 of the population still not able to access any digital connectivity or benefit, or really, move on this journey as fast as the rest of us. So there's a serious gap, because we are talking about the majority of the people that are still not connected. They are still not able to access digital services and able to communicate properly. So that's a big problem. And more than that, if we think about the impact of COVID, on top of that, now, yes, everybody moved to an online working environment, all the way from government offices to schools to many other entities that people use to interact day-to-day basis. You have a problem at the municipality, many people still goes physically to a municipal office. You have a problem with home affairs, still you need to go there. And not all the services were digitized prior to the COVID-19. So you still have lots of services that you need to access to, and you need to go physically. There are many services like home affairs and whatsoever who are not able to provide certain services, or their capacity has reduced drastically because their stuff has moved. They are not able to digitize those services as fast as required. So now imagine those population who are already disadvantaged through not having access to internet and connectivity. Now they are also disadvantaged on their day-to-day interaction with those public services, public offices, because they do not find counterparts. The level of service has deteriorated, and probably, I mean, it ends up with long queues and long waiting times, and certain services are not available at all. So that is a major problem that the COVID has showed us that we have to deal with urgently. And yes, there have been a policy focus in terms of broadband access, digital inclusion. Many governments in Africa has come up with broadband policies and similar initiatives. But unfortunately, I think what happened through this digital move, I mean, has highlighted major shortcomings in implementation of those policies and advancing digital access and digital connectivity on the continent.
Yeah, it's, very interesting that I read when we talk of digital divide, we often think mostly Africa. It was interesting to find that in excess of 40% of Americans are experiencing the same digital divide. But in the instance of America, it's a cost issue where the users are having the accessibility to the service. However, due to cost considerations, they are not able to actually access broadband services. So like you're saying as well, I fully agree with you. It's a value chain issue where you've got various challenges along that value chain. It's not just a connectivity issue. Once you do get the connectivity, there's value adds that need to be looked at. Digitization of the services that also needs to be looked at. If we look at well, we've been talking to some of the challenges in the telecommunications sector. That's brought about also by the recent pandemic that we're going through. But in this turmoil, and with especially in South Africa, we've got very high unemployment. It's actually increased during COVID. Could you tell us maybe about some of the job creation and business creation opportunities that there might be in the sector?
Sure.
And maybe just add also on top of that to say that the picture that you have painted of saying 2/3 of the African population does not have access clearly points to a big headroom in terms of growth opportunities. And so we're addressing South Africa, but at the same time addressing the whole of Africa. How are we going to close that gap?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, Devesh and George, thanks for your questions. I think, I mean, Devesh, what you mentioned is quite important, addressing the value chain, because there are aspects that lies on the supply side of the things. There are lots of challenges there, which I will expand and elaborate on. But also demand side is important as the supply side needs to be tackled at the same time. And if I have been talking about it for almost a decade now, because most of the focus when we talk about digital dividend is almost about the supply side. Do we have service? Why there is no investment going on? Why the investment is not reaching to universal coverage and also. But I mean, the demand side is important, and I will explain what I mean by that. At the end of the day, I mean, for a digital environment to be successful, there are a few key elements. One of them is availability. Is the service available? Is there infrastructure providing a connectivity service? The second aspect is accessibility. Can people access to those services? And that accessibility comes with, can they buy that service? Do they have devices to make use of that service? Do they have digital literacy to make use of those services? Third one is affordability. Can the people afford those services? And fourth one is about really relevance and importance in terms of digital content, as well as literacy to consume those digital services. I mean, all this needs to come together. And when we look into some of the policies, and recently I've been talking in different form about it as well, most of the policies, government policies, are looking into availability issue. Most of the targets are number of schools connected, number of hospitals connected, number of premises connected. Yes, it is directionally right, but it is falling really short of the end goal. We really need to start with looking into social impact of the goals that we are trying to drive through policies and through implementation of those policies. At the end of the day, I mean, number of schools connected doesn't tell me much. What is important, I guess, is really through enabling that digital environment, how many students that we onboarded otherwise who wouldn't be able to access to education. In terms of healthcare services, again, I mean, number of connected hospitals do not tell me much. I mean, we really need to talk about through enabling e-health services, how many more patients we were able to treat at a facility, how much waiting time at those reception areas that we reduced, how many travel times that we saved because we expanded these services to remote areas. I think those are the real goals. So I think, I mean, and they are not, again, only availability of connectivity or service. It is more about really bringing all this environment together, because you need to have devices, you need to have affordability, you need to have applications running on those, and some of these things really extend as far as to fiscal policies, because at the end of the day, when we talk about device, when we talk about availability of service in a remote area, all goes hand in hand. So because if we are to enable or improve demand side of the things, then it will be more commercial appetite for service providers to go and deploy and invest in these services. So it is really a circular value chain that, chicken and egg situation. One needs to happen, but still, I mean, it comes to a point that all these things have to happen at the same time in parallel. So when we look into plans, I mean, really, our plans need to start from an endpoint, what we want to achieve, and work from backwards from there to understand what we need to enable different components coming together. Because, I mean, again, I mean, it goes to training service providers to be able to provide those services over to digital platforms as well. Now, in terms of, I mean, how do we go about this gap, and what progress is being made? I think from an inception point, we are starting from a deficit position from an infrastructure point of view. Again, I mean, most people on the continent made their first phone calls through mobile networks. Prior to that, I mean, the fixed line reach was very limited, still remains very limited today. So if you look into 20 years back versus today, as I said, I mean, half the people remained unconnected, but we connected 500 million people. I mean, it is a major achievement, right? And you can look at the glass half full, half empty. But at the end of the day, I mean, yes, there is progress being made, and there are, I mean, more and more investments going through. But the challenge in Africa, I guess, is on top of the infrastructure deficit from a starting point, we also have a big continent geographically, and the population is not necessarily only on the dense urban areas. Most countries have the 2/3 of their population still living in rural areas. So now you have this vast land to cover to get access to that 2/3 population living in the rural areas. That comes with a lot of investment. From a revenue point of view, affordability becomes a barrier. I mean, we are looking at like $2, $3 average revenue per users on the continent, versus Europe, US markets. You are looking at $15, $20 plus points from a monthly usage, monthly revenue point of view. So I mean, you are generating 1/10 of the revenue from a user, but you still need to deploy even more infrastructure to cover, because you need to cover a much wider area. The commercials becomes really challenging on the continent. Against that, still the progress is impressive. Just in 2 decades, we have made these services available to half the population. But at the same time, again, if you compare the pace of this infrastructure development on the continent from a telecoms point of view versus other key infrastructure, electricity, water, sanitation, I mean, again, it's fast. I mean, again, the electrification rate in most countries is less than a quarter of the population. And that has been there for more than a century, that service, right? And so comparing to those, there is definitely a big progress and big, achievement from that angle. Now, going forward, I think, I mean, the telecommunications also has a different dynamic as well. I mean, this is a sector where the things change quite fast and quite drastically. Again, I mean, I will give you an example of mobile telecommunication services again within what happened in 20 years. When we started the journey, there were only one or two mobile networks in every country. Now it is at least 2, 3, 4, some countries 5, 6. So there are plenty competition established, not only one monopoly, but competition is there. So obviously, I mean, for a mobile network operator, if they were doing a really lucrative kind of business at early stages, the pressure from the competition increased over time. Not only direct competition, but also competition on the products that they used to in-house produce and sell. What was that? Voice, messaging, data. Now, they are facing competition from non-traditional competitors, right? I mean, they are facing competition from your OTTs, over-the-top players, such as WhatsApp, Skype, and all the voice services that's going on there. So, I mean, voice became a declining revenue. SMS, I think there is no revenue anymore for anyone. So, data networks, I mean, there is definitely a substitution by data. So, the revenues are growing, but the investment required to meet that revenue growth is massive, because initial networks that was built for voice communication was much easier. Single 2G site could cover kilometers of distances. You didn't need that density. As we go along the journey, when we move to 3G, 4G, now 5G, we are talking about sites getting densified and much getting closer. So that densification by a factor of 10 plus, I mean, it's a massive investment requirement on the operator. So therefore, I mean, that investment pressure still is there. You also have the pressure of your products getting contested by non-traditional, so your revenues are declining. Hence, I mean, they are looking at also how else they can generate revenues from the subscribers that they have. And hence, I mean, we have seen lots of new digital services coming on board, financial services, entertainment, insurance, to lots of lifestyle services. So if looking to operator results in recent days, I mean, all those new digital services really constitute a big part of their revenue mix at the moment. So they are shifting their business model. That shift comes with an investment and expense as well. So now they are not only investing in infrastructure, but they are investing in enabling these new services as well, which is good, because I mean, like some of these things have been really pioneered in Africa, like financial services, M-Pesas, and all other mobile money offerings on the continent.
Kenya.
Exactly.
Bora, it is beautiful the way you have integrated commerce and engineering and technology and policy and strategy into it. This is beautiful to my ears. And this brings me to the mindsets that we have as the consumers of these technologies, or even the policy makers and the people, the leadership that drives strategy. This is one industry, in my view, and I want your opinion on this, that it doesn't really have borders. It doesn't have a border. But the way we come up with strategies and policies, we're very inward-looking. You're talking about the new players that come into play that are not necessarily located in your country, and they are not really interested in your local domestic policies, but they love your market.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
your comment there.
I mean, Sam, I mean, you are right. You are spot on, because obviously, I mean, these are international large players, and their pace and access to markets are unstoppable and really, have big impact on local markets. Because at the end of the day, their set of products and services is not only communication, it's not only messaging. I mean, some of these things are offered for free. So access to information, access to end users in different ways is the target, right? Because they are able to offer all kind of services ranging from social services, from entertainment to music services to whatever, but also business services. I mean, they are the main providers of, as we call, cloud services, right? I mean, everything, and we can expand on that a bit more as well. When we talk about cloud services, we are talking about any industry. We are talking about traditional IT services being offered by these players as hosted services. We are talking about all the applications running on those platforms offered by these services, and those are in healthcare, education, financial services. So, I mean, through access, through connectivity, through offering all the other services, and disrupting the traditional mobile network operator or network operator model, they are also establishing an access to a local population, larger population, to offer any kind of services, disrupting all other industries. So we really need to be mindful about this, because, I mean, as I said, I mean, this sector is moving, I don't know, in a mind-blowing manner. I mean, in every couple of years, the role plays are changed, the players are changed, and who is doing is changed. So within that pace, obviously, I mean, the regulators in particular really struggle to follow up with all these developments, and sometimes I think really focuses on a wrong place. I mean, we are still trying to regulate spectrum, we are trying to regulate certain digital infrastructure and all, but I mean, all other services that runs on that remains unregulated, and mostly extradited from the local economy. So I mean, it has major implications, and as you said, I mean, focus needs to be really what it matters, where it matters. Otherwise, I mean, we will find ourselves, as I used to call it a bit controversially, digital colonization. Because I mean, at the end of the day, if we allow 5-6 major global companies to reach everyone and provide any service, I mean, then we are almost moving into a science fiction movie kind of environment, where the world is, managed by these mega giants, and it's a bit scary if you think about it.
It's, when you speak colonization in terms of a digital service provision perspective, for me, it's interesting again that the US doesn't really have a major player in that space of digital technology provision from a network perspective. But just also to add on to what Sam had raised earlier, as well as what you had said, it's a bit of a two sides of the same coin perspective for me, in that the telecommunications, the multinationals that do enter into the African space, they do so because it's highly lucrative market. South Africa, for instance, is one of the most expensive telecommunications service providers to consumers, I mean, in the world. And at the same time, we've got other countries in Africa, certain areas as well within South Africa, or other existing markets, where the service is not provided because it's deemed to be not as profitable as other areas. I mean, South African market is worth billions of rands, if we could get a telecoms player to actually have a wider view in terms of a model for other areas in Africa, we could easily cover the entire continent with digital service. We could easily give out devices. Look at also the Indian market, for example. They've got low cost, very affordable smart devices which they produce within the country itself. That is from a policy perspective, the government taking a stance to benefit the people. South African market, maybe if you can give your opinion as well, it's not necessarily geared to the best interests of the people and for the poor. It's more a commercial, capitalist approach that we're doing the policies.
Devesh, thanks for that. I think, I mean, your point around South Africa and cost of telecommunications over here is interesting. And I will agree and disagree on certain points of South Africa being expensive. So at the end of the day, I mean, again, if you look into South African landscape and what has been achieved from a supply side of the things, it is, again, I mean, impressive in my opinion, because we have over 99% 3G network coverage in this country. 4G network coverage is over 96%, which is really impressive. But the problem is not on the supply side, as I said, because against that 96% 4G coverage, still the subscriptions, 4G subscriptions, less than 1/3. So why? I mean, service is available. It is fast broadband. Why people are not making use of it? There are a few reasons. One is handsets, still expensive, and there are various reasons for that. I mean, even though device prices globally came down drastically, and as you said, there is even a second-hand market and whatsoever over there, but still, I mean, fiscal policies in terms of tax, import taxes, and all those things really adds up to accessibility to those devices, 4G devices. It is growing, but still, in a slow pace. And again, I mean, this is a technology now since 2008, 13 years old technology. So, and if we are still talking about expensive devices, I mean, we really need to understand why, right? I mean, and this is despite some of the operators are even putting subsidies to these devices because they don't even want to run a 2G network anymore. They want to use that spectrum on 4G. So it's in their interest. But I mean, still, the progress is you have the network, you don't have the usage. Second is, I mean,
who is responsible or should be responsible in educating the consumers? Because I have that concern as you have. Because there's no use to have a massive development in terms of infrastructure and the consumers just want to do the basic of the basics and they don't realize that actually this is the power in their hands if they were to also migrate, because it's not always related to inability to afford. It relates to not knowing what they can do with what they have.
Yeah, Sam, I think, I mean, there are two things, right? I mean, if there's a service good, I mean, people will make use of it. I mean, the only reason that people are not making use of it is not awareness, in my opinion, is because device cost. Secondly, there's still the cost of data, mobile data, and that's, what Devesh is alluding to. Now, when we look into cost of mobile data, I mean, there has been recent mobile market inquiry by ICASA, and there was a report coming out of that as well, stating South Africa is not worst in terms of being most expensive. It's not the best as well, so it is kind of comparable in a mid-range. But I mean, the same report concludes that comparing to China and few other markets, I mean, even some African markets, the cost is higher. Now, we really need to look into this, Devesh, a bit more holistically in terms of why that cost is high. And when we look into that, we need to also bring other aspects of what we are comparing. Are we comparing to apples? Because I mean, some of the markets that these comparisons are run are countries where you have 4G coverage only in major cities. I mean, maybe half the population is covered. So the investment hasn't been great. In South Africa, we are talking about 96+% coverage. Secondly, spectrum. It is the key, because there is a very basic dynamic between the spectrum, amount of spectrum, and the investment. If you have more spectrum, you can, from a single site, provide more capacity, in very simple terms. If you don't, to provide the capacity, you need to add more sites in between. So if you don't have spectrum, then you have to invest more. So there is that dynamic between amount of spectrum and the amount of investment to provide services, cost and production cost. So in South Africa, unfortunately, we haven't released spectrum for over 2005 to now, 16 years. Okay, so I mean, still, operators are making magic tricks to, find spectrum and provide these services. So, and if you compare, again, cost of communication against the spectrum available on the other countries, coverage achieved by those operators, and bring all those together into apple to apple, I don't think South Africa will rank too badly from that angle. Now, can we do better? Absolutely. I mean, make the spectrum available to the market, right? I mean, then that will take an immense pressure off the operators. It will ignite more competition, and it will eventually reflect on consumer prices. So at the end of the day, I mean, it is everybody's interest, I guess, to achieve that. So
how do we
Bora, and I will give George an opportunity. You can see we are very fascinated by this because we are all affected. What are the politics? What are the politics of spectrum provision?
Well, I guess, I mean, spectrum has been an interesting journey in South Africa. I mean, there were several attempts to assign spectrum over the at least 5-6 years now. I mean, the first attempt was halted by a dispute by the minister and the ICASA, the regulator, and it went to a court process, and that was halted, and all that process was canned. And in recent days, indeed, end of March was the auction date that was set for the spectrum allocation in South Africa. Unfortunately, again, same operators indeed who need this spectrum the most, Telkom and MTN, brought a court interdict to the process. Now, I mean, there are, you can always look into this in both sides, right? Because there are certain claims to say that regulator didn't do his job properly. There wasn't enough market study to substantiate spectrum auction, and not everything has been concerned. Also, there was certain dynamics within the auction process that was defined, because that 5G spectrum, I mean, may or may not be accessible by some of the contestants on that process. Because of that, I mean, then it went to, again, a court interdict. Hopefully, I mean, it will be finalized out of the court in next few months with communication and negotiation between the affected parties and the regulator. Because otherwise, I mean, if we were to go through a legal process on this, we are looking at least few years to again, for that spectrum to be available. So it is not in anybody's interest. Unfortunately, I mean, somehow parties are not able to find a common ground to take this forward. It is unfortunate, but by all means, in my opinion, really, some of the commercial interests, some of the other interests needs to be parked, and interests of the consumer and the public should really prevail. And we need to get this spectrum to the hands of operators as soon as possible.
Now, my question is simply this. So as the complexities of where the spectrum scenario is, don't quite interest the common man. What the common man wants to know is that, assuming tomorrow you wave the magic wand and the spectrum issue was resolved, what does that mean for them?
What does that mean is,
on price, on cost, what does that mean for them?
George, I mean, to start with, I mean, making more spectrum available, and given that spectrum is usable, because one of the issues is it is so-called digital dividend spectrum, which is sub 1 gigahertz, often called 700 and 800 megahertz spectrum. Those spectrum previously was used by broadcasters, so there is a analog switch off where all those broadcasting services was supposed to transition out of those spectrum so it can be used for telecommunication services. Unfortunately, I mean, again, in South Africa, it brings us to a problem of that digital migration, which was supposed to happen by 2015, and we are still, I mean, 6 years after not completed that. And until it is completed, that spectrum cannot be used because it will interfere with existing broadcasting services. So given that, I mean, we sort that issue out as well. If we are to make this spectrum available to the market, that means operators almost overnight will be able to provide more capacity on their base stations. That means more capacity means, obviously the pricing coming down. At the end of the day, they can offer much better pricing because they are able to do that without significant additional investment. So that will have a direct impact on the consumers and cost of data to start with. Beyond that, I mean, again, as much as we have 96% coverage, probably it will accelerate to breach that remaining 3-4% gap to make those services available and improve the quality of those services as well. So at the end of the day, from a consumer point of view, spectrum means better pricing, better quality of service, and better coverage.
And just also in terms of something you had mentioned earlier, Bora, this value chain that exists, it does bring, especially since we've sort of leapfrogged in comparison with other markets, as well as in terms of other services, infrastructure-related services. We've sort of leapfrogged. We've jumped from fixed line to a digital, unlike other places in the world where they've had a steady transition. With this, this new transition or digital approach that we are faced with, even though there's challenges, there is still opportunities in terms of this value chain. If you look at app development, if you look at new product development, can you talk to some of that you might have experienced in the African market?
Devesh, I skipped your previous question. You asked me about job creation opportunities driven by the digital era, right? I think coming back to that, thanks for reminding me. Coming back to that, there are two pockets of job creation opportunities driven by digital era. One of them is direct job creation driven by this sector, because from digital infrastructure point of view, as I said, we are in deficit. There is a huge amount of digital infrastructure that needs to be developed on the continent. And what am I talking about in English terms is I'm talking about fiber networks, I'm talking about data centers, I am talking about still wireless networks. So at the end of the day, all these projects, when they are pursued, will require deployment of this infrastructure. Hence, people need to all the way from basic labor to trench the roads, to put that utilities, to project manage, to even from a financial point of view, provide financing, professional services around there. It will have obviously this ongoing investment in the digital infrastructure space will result in job creation automatically. But more importantly, I guess it is the indirect part that is really interesting, because at the end of the day, industrial part of it is straightforward, not worth changing. It's not going to change the dynamics. But What it enables is, I mean, once you have the digital maturity in a market where you have good broadband connectivity, where you have the cloud infrastructure and all, it opens up immense opportunities for entrepreneurs, SMEs, and people who leverage that digital infrastructure to deploy other services, disrupting services on industries. And we have seen in recent years, how this changed drastically. I mean, we have seen Airbnbs, we have seen Ubers, and all those things coming out of this kind of developments. From an African point of view, again, there are lots of good examples to that. I mean, we have fintech, as we said. I mean, mobile money services really has been very successful on the continent. We have seen people, using delivery services and even developing new address systems, because addressing system, postal codes, or whatever is not well developed in every country. There are entrepreneurs who bridge those gaps and provided those kind of services. We have fintech opportunities coming up in terms of, again, I mean, there are plenty of fintech companies providing microloans to all other financial services utilizing this infrastructure, both connectivity and the backend systems point of view. And countless. I mean, we have seen entertainment companies coming up on the continent, rivaling with Netflix's and all. We have seen, online trading. I mean, e-trading companies coming up. Even MTN invested in some, other operators invested in some. I mean, some of these have been listed as well. I mean, there is an ongoing space for innovation. That innovation really is, in my opinion, locally and community driven, because some of these challenges, that why some of these things have been successful, why mobile money has been successful in Africa, because I mean there is a need, because most people do not have access to a bank or bank account, and all of a sudden we are unlocking a value over there overnight. So it is unique, because we have unique challenges due to lack of legacy infrastructure and services. Today, I mean, really, once we have this cloud infrastructure and good connectivity from your home, from your laptop, I mean, and including, with lots of guidance and how to do videos that you can access from YouTube and whatsoever, you can start businesses, establish platforms, establish softwares, solving problems that you see relevant to your community. And again, I mean, that has not been there in the past. And I think that's where we should really be focusing on. Because, I mean, it is achievable, because it is globally available, accessible from everywhere. And the only problem is the awareness and skills, because that's where we need to put emphasis on. Infrastructure is there, platforms are there, they are free, they are accessible, or they can easily be utilized, but it requires a bit of knowledge and a bit of awareness. And if we are to encourage our youth, and youth is the future of Africa, right? I mean, we have, I think, 60% of population, if I'm not wrong, is younger than 25 on the continent. So, I mean, it is a massive opportunity that we are looking at, because some of these services can then grow globally. I think, I mean, that is the real opportunity from a job creation point of view, because at the end of the day, we cannot rely anymore on large enterprises or government to create jobs. Jobs needs to be created by the people and the community itself. And again, these digital tools and environment enables that. It's just that we really need to focus on educating, digital awareness, digital literacy, and awareness. I mean, because some of these things, you are interested, go Google it, YouTube it. You can find how to do kind of tutorials even available at the tip of your fingers. Again, assuming, I mean, this population have access to that connectivity. I mean, that's really coming back to that.
And I assume that that is the opportunity you are identifying there on the supply side of talent. Why are we not seeing more and more of our learning institutions adjusting and grabbing this opportunity, because immense. I mean, for me, I mean, even myself, when trying to get into this space, I realized that before I can even adopt a particular product, they throw at me a manual that I need to go through to understand this product, which in some of these things, one should be having them already before even you get into the platform. Why is they that reluctant to capitalize on this beautiful market in terms of training and developing and capacitating the people who are going to be playing in the space?
Sorry, Sam, can we have that break and then we can come back with the discussion?
Want us to go on a break? Let me see how I'm going to break that down. It's a bit of a challenge.
I was wondering if the news was going to kick in at 55.
No. We can continue. It wouldn't be interrupting with us.
Okay, no problem. Bora, if you can touch on what Sam was raising.
Look, I think, I mean, again, I mean, it goes beyond me as well. I mean, I think there is definitely a big opportunity for the youth, for job creation, for taking advantage of all these developments and investments going on the continent. And some countries are really more advantaged than others, like key markets like Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya in particular, multiple submarine cables, lots of investment in terms of data centers, broadband infrastructure, population, I mean, large populations, and hence, I mean, if you come up with a appealing service, I mean, the access to consumer and the market is there. So I think, I mean, we really need to take advantage of this new digital era and investment coming closer to our shores. And again, I mean, Sam, I cannot agree more. I think, I mean, that should be the focus of the educational direction, and focus of both. Again, I mean, it should come from a demand point of view, because I mean, if there is demand, there will always be someone who will be supplying that. I think, I mean, if with awareness, with a bit of focus, and I think, I mean, some of the kids, my kids, I mean, your kids, probably their generation are a bit special because they were born into a connected world, right? And I think, I mean, they will probably see this opportunity a bit clearer than our generation, which went through all this transformation of not even having emails. I mean, I remember the days of posts, days of analog phones that you need to dial the number and even turn the wheel, right? I mean, so we have been a transitional generation. Our kids, I think, are much luckier, and they are naturally born into a digital environment and understand this much better. But I think, I mean, there should definitely be more focus, more structured focus from education and programs enabling our youth to address this opportunity.
Yeah, I think what you're saying as well is so pertinent in that, yes, the youth, they attach themselves, they become engrossed, and they really do learn digital technologies very quickly. Unfortunately, the rest of the educational systems that's in play don't conform to that. So I often, with my own kids, I find that give them something digital, they will eat it up. They will understand it very quickly. But if you go back to the traditional things that they need to learn, the traditional methods that the schools are using, they find that difficult. The attention spans are challenged. So there's still a lot, I mean, that value chain we spoke of, in particular for the education systems, there's still a lot of work to be done and catch up.
So the answers lie in the title of your show,
yes.
Devesh. Who is in that decision-making level, who is not recognizing that we need to bring the right kind of mindset to enable this. So basically, you are saying that the decision makers are us, and who are not able to realize that things have to change.
Yes, Sam, and I think what Bora also mentioned earlier is that we, the transitional generation, the older people, unfortunately and fortunately, in some instances, that same transitional generation is the decision makers. They are the leaders, and they are working in all the different spheres. And often we are probably getting the mismatch because of that, in that the vision might be there, the strategies might be there, but they don't have that input from the actual people who will be impacted. That's the youth, to bring in that fresh innovation insight in terms of what is it that they need. I mean, honestly, as well, I look at some of the school learning materials and I also think to myself, how's this going to help anybody? But they have to learn it. If they don't learn it, they struggle. They're enjoying the digital aspects, they're enjoying technology aspects, but the the languages and even the languages, what they learn in the schools versus what they learn online, the way they communicate, even if you put WhatsApp, for example, chatting, they developed a language of their own. So now that needs to translate again to the systems that we have, educating the same youth. Just also in that line, I mean, South African government is been talking a lot. They've put forth certain structures in place. The new buzzword has always been fourth industrial revolution. And of course, the premise of fourth industrial revolution is digital platforms, digitalization of services, and of course, unlocking this value chain that we've been talking about, focusing on all the various aspects of fourth industrial revolution by digitizing the various systems that we had in a non-digital fashion. If we look at the fourth industrial revolution and even players, again, multinationals like Tesla, already operating in South Africa, providing satellite infrastructure based on low Earth orbit infrastructure. Once again, we kind of missing the boat, losing out on the opportunity. Two big players in the market, Amazon and Tesla, both are wanting to enter into the South African market. And I would think the target is not necessarily for internet use or for for chatting platforms. But if we look at fourth industrial revolution, Internet of Things, smart city, can you share with us and the viewers and the listeners some of the experiences you've had in terms of Internet of Things, fourth industrial revolution, smart city? What does that all mean?
Sure. Thanks, Devesh. In terms of those words and concepts, IoT, fourth industrial, I mean, they are really wide-ranging and, if I may say, buzzwords, because it can mean anything that anybody puts a meaning to that. So I think, I mean, we really need to be, and it's a danger within itself as well, because we want to establish a smart city. And depends on who you are speaking to. It can mean anything from a free Wi-Fi hotspot to fully automated systems, to digitization of services, government services. I mean, it can mean anything, and it can mean all of these things all together as well. So we really need to be very specific in terms of what the objectives are. I mean, that was my starting point as well. When we put targets, we cannot just put a target of being a leading 4IR nation. I mean, what it means, I mean, it has to be very specific. And in terms of, I mean, again, there are several components that needs to fall into place for these things to evolve. The starting point is, again, coming to the foundations and basics. You need to have absolutely good quality broadband connectivity that is affordable and accessible by everyone. I think that is the starting point. Because once you have the broadband connectivity and access and affordable manner where people are widely using it, that enables all other digital services to be deployed. I mean, all the way from the data centers to cloud services to platforms that they are running on top of it. So, I mean, that goes hand in hand. I mean, all those platforms, IoT solutions, and availability and innovation around that all depends on the availability of broadband infrastructure. So once we get those together, once we get the platforms and other infrastructure, digital infrastructure together, then the next step is really the, as we said, digital skills to enable unlocking some of those opportunities. Now, in terms of, I mean, again, every country is different. We cannot speak for Africa as one, right? I mean, every country has its own level of evolution and advancement in this. South Africa is probably a bit ahead of the game comparing to some other countries. Malawi may be still in the very basics of establishing this broadband connectivity. So it depends on which country we are talking. Really, we really need to put the targets specific to that country because everybody needs to go through these steps. Now, in terms of, I mean, 4IR and what are the key targeted implementation or utilization of digital technologies going forward. I think the industrial use of it is what is in the heart of 4IR. And we are all the way talking from factory automation to self-driving cars to use of really fully automated service systems. And again, I mean, some of these things may look like future-looking, but the thing is, I mean, all the future-looking things need to start somewhere. And some of those things may not be indeed so future-looking. I mean, because beyond the prototypes, I mean, use of these cars and even the self-driving drones and all is there. I mean, is available commercially and widely used elsewhere. So it will eventually, come here and be available. Again, I mean, when I am asked in terms of what's the future of connectivity, what's the future of business models, what's going to happen, I mean, we are still in a good place because we don't have to look into the crystal ball. We just need to look into elsewhere where this happened and we can really see where we are going because it's always happened this way. There is a lag of 3 to 5 years. Between leaders and where Africa is going or leading countries in Africa following through, but it always happens here as well. So from that angle, if you look into now the development of digital infrastructure, again, what we see obviously quite a lot of investment into establishing good broadband. It goes through all the wireless networks, fiber networks supporting that. But that networks, Devesh, is getting much closer to the end user and use cases. Because most of when we look into industrial connectivity and solutions, like factory automation, like self-driving cars or sort, you are looking at a very location-specific service. But what's important over there is quality of service, because when you go into a factory automation, you need to have a network that has very low latency, and latency means like the time that it takes for data to communicate between a commanding brain, let's say, to a machine over there. And that we are talking about milliseconds, and if there is a delay, you might be punching a wrong, part or whatsoever. So I mean, those things, reliability, quality becomes important. The only way it can be achieved is when we bring this networking and computing capabilities closer to those end use case. It is true for industrial use. It is true for even a consumer use point of view as well, because most of us have moved on to video on demand, entertainment on demand. The corporates now, I mean, needs to serve to their employees or reach to their employees, not only sitting in one office now, but in their homes, spread around everywhere in the country. So the applications that they are running in their businesses, or you are downloading from a Netflix or whatsoever, it has to sit closer to you. What it means is then we are coming to now investment into edge data centers and networks, private networks that are running those applications and so on, which is closer to the end user and use case. That means we have to invest more. I mean, not only we need to bridge the deficit, historic deficit, but now we have to invest more. And I'm often asked, how much more investment we are talking about. In a Thumbsuck point of view, my answer is 10 times more infrastructure in 10 years. So that means, we need to have 10 times more fiber kilometers, 10 times more network service points, 10 times more data centers. Not at the same scale, probably much smaller scale. Probably we are talking about data centers in a container size facilities. We are talking about wireless networks just sitting like a Wi-Fi router in your room or in your building. But again, that 10 times growth is a massive investment.
There is another big market. Sorry for interrupting. I just want to interject,
please.
Because you're saying things that are so much enlightening. There's one big market, and I want you to comment on this. One big sector within this sector that I see we are missing it, that the young people will grab it wholeheartedly, and that is the entertainment sector. There's one day there was a football match in the UEFA Championship that was playing, and it was so funny because the stadium are very empty because of the COVID regulations. And there was one guy who was streaming that game. There were thousands and thousands of people that were not watching on TV, but they were watching on his stream and his comments, and they were connecting from anywhere in the world. Actually, it was boring to watch the game on TV. Vis-a-vis, I just moved on to this. I said, this is massive, massive industry. And I'm just imagining what that could do in terms of entrepreneurship, the people that will go into the streaming business.
Absolutely. I think, that's very correct. That's to the heart of it, to the core of it, Sam. I think, that is an opportunity that digital environment is opening up, because now you can get that streaming game in your own particular manner and add value to that and make it more interesting. And that is one. And we do see a lot of also independent journalists now. They are running their own news channels on YouTube or whatsoever with lots of subscribers, it enables complete independent opinion sharing, without having a boss or media house telling you what to do or what to write. And it opens up all the different opportunities of driving that kind of value add through your own way. And again, if you look into the growth of data traffic, I think it's a big part of it comes from video traffic. And big part of that video traffic is really royalty-free videos. Like YouTube environments or similar environments as well, where people produce their own content, and people really would like to access that kind of communication, especially in new generation. They are no more interested in broadcasting media or whatsoever. They are really interested in what their peers are doing, something interesting, something different. It goes from video to gaming to many other aspects. But absolutely, you are right. I think that is the opportunity that we are talking about. And when we talk about, again, going forward opportunity around that, Devesh, linking it back to this development of network densification and edge data centers and private networks and all, because if you have all those in place, people who are interested in launching that services can do it with ease on that edge data center or through virtual machines or through access to that consumer base with ease from at the convenience of their laptops. So, all those things are possible and happening. Now, coming back to your question in terms of smart cities, I said, it can really mean many things from people to people. And we really need to have a holistic approach to smart cities, in my opinion, because most of the in the past, I mean, most of the city officials that I engage with, I mean, smart city was like free Wi-Fi. Again, I mean, it just, I mean, in my opinion, it is so short of the end goal, because enabling free Wi-Fi is good. Yes, I mean, it kind of bridge some level of connectivity gap, but where do people make use of connectivity? I mean, free Wi-Fi is available, I don't know, in libraries, in some squares, whatsoever. I mean, and you see indeed people literally, sitting in a fence of a clinic trying to get to a free Wi-Fi. It's not the ideal way. I mean, people want to, make use of this service at their homes. I mean, where they have, comfort. I mean, most people, you don't want to sit on a street and use Wi-Fi. So how do we achieve that? And how do you get there? I mean, free Wi-Fi is not necessarily the solution to that. How do you get it to people's homes and they can afford it, they can enjoy it, they can use it? Second thing is, what services are offered on top of that? Because I think, I mean, that is a key question, because yes, you want to connect people, but you want to connect people to do something productive. It is not to just, I don't know, I'll be very blunt. I mean, it's not just to use for porn, right? I mean, it's not the point of providing free Wi-Fi or connectivity. How do we bridge the content aspect? How do we bring the meaningful use to that connectivity? And we really need to, when we look into smart city, then we need to incorporate all those content, all those useful cases. Because today, for many people, airtime is sometimes a trade-off between a loaf of bread or airtime. I mean, if it is the case, then they need to get a value out of it. And that comes with then at least digitized public services. You need to save some travel time, some queue time, some interaction time by digitizing many services. Today in the cities, there are so many things that can be digitized, from building permits to basic account management of their bills to whatever. Yes, there are some platforms, very short in their nature. I mean, you don't get support, you are not able to plan all those together and plan all those industrial use of smart city services in terms of workflow automation, in terms of waste collection, in terms of leakages on your water pipes, leakages on your power systems, particularly now with all this power outages going on. I mean, establishing sensor-based systems over there, automated switches and whatsoever, because most of the time power comes back and goes, transformer trips off, and then you are still out of power. Automate those kind of things. I mean, really start from the use case, then go back in terms of what you need to do. Hence, I mean, in my opinion, really smart city needs to be measured by the real outcome and efficiencies that is achieved, savings from a monetary point of view, but more important, the socioeconomic impact. Start from there, what you want to achieve, work it backwards. And again, I mean, same thing goes into 4IR. Again, I mean, we will see these networks and infrastructure growing, coming to the end user and use cases. It will require a lot of investment. And probably, I mean, we will again see some shift in the value chain, because now in the past, operators used to like owning and, deploying their own networks. Going forward, everything inherently will be shared. So there will be shared networks, shared data centers, shared infrastructure. And again, I mean, that will move out of the operators, probably independent infrastructure companies. Today, there are fiber companies, independent tower companies, independent data center players. Probably we'll see a more integrated infrastructure, digital infrastructure companies replacing this networking aspect that is shared between the operators. That's an opportunity again. From my point of view, again, I mean, 4IR really needs to look into this changing value chain and enabling those shift in the environment and the investment. Because when I say 10 times growth, that means 10 times investment, right? I mean, today, if you look into MNOs in South Africa, each is spending around 10 billion a year. So and at least 50-60 billion investment in a year. So if you are to do that for 10 years in an accelerating manner, look at the scale of that investment requirement. You are looking at trillion rands kind of investment at least. And how are we going to achieve that? How are we going to attract that investment and make it attractive for many to come and invest? You talked about low Earth orbit satellites, right? LEO satellites. Yes, it is started. Early stages still. We need to establish constellation of tens of thousands of satellites, which is a very aggressive target. But again, it will take time, Devesh, to make it accessible and affordable. Because still, if you look into the antennas that needs to connect to those satellites, that they need to follow the satellites, so they need steering systems. They are expensive today. They are not affordable. It will become affordable at a time, but it will require penetration and adoption of that technology. Probably it's not going to start here, because like 4G end user devices, after 13 years we are still looking at affordability issue. LEO satellite solution will be there, but it will take time to adapt. I think really technology is running ahead of what people can achieve. What we need to do is really defining use cases and starting from there and identifying how we address those requirements. Because technology is not one or another. It is often the combination of all these things coming together in networks.
Bora, if I could just say something, when I came into this program, I actually thought from a technical knowledge point of view, South Africa, we were quite ahead. But I'm actually very depressed now that I see that there's a huge gap from where we are now and where we can be. The gap is huge. Now we have the free trade, the Africa free trade area coming in. So I'm going to be even more depressed because now there's a bigger market. And we're way even back now. How do we close that gap?
I'm sorry, my intention was not to depress anyone, but I think at the same time it means opportunity, right? Because that gap means opportunity, and I think that is the beauty of it. And to be honest, I think some of these things really revealed into opportunities, as we discussed, like mobile money, as we discussed some of the new business models in mostly widely adopted in South Africa, like open access fiber to the home model, right? Most of these things, open access have been there, but like Vumatels and even now OpenServe, Metro Fiber Network, all these guys are providing open access infrastructure shared by the ISPs. So these things are quite a innovative approach to the business models driven by the local dynamics of the country. And I think with more infrastructure requirements growing, we will see more opportunities and innovation even from a business model point of view. But I think coming back to how we bridge this gap, we really need to go back to developing and driving more holistic policies, and that has to bring not only the infrastructure aspect, but also all the fiscal policies, all the investment enabling environment in the country, and that is really wide-ranging requirements, in my opinion. So how do we bridge the gap? The gap is very difficult to qualify because end goal post, there is no end goal post or static state. Telecoms and digital innovation have been really evolving beyond expectation, or anybody cannot really define an end point. It's not like electrification of every house and every facility connected. It is really beyond that, because what we are talking about is touching every industry and disruption in every industry enabled by digital technologies, which is endless in nature. everything is changing. The way, again, within 1 year, we have seen how it can enable a new way of life during a pandemic. And some of these things is really very fast developing, and we will see some of these services, futuristic services, coming probably a bit faster than that we expect. And at the end of the day, we have to keep on adjusting and following, and more importantly, educating our youth, because they have to take the flag and bridge the gap and run faster than we did going forward to bridge the gap. And at the moment, there is an opportunity and environment that is enabling. That is the good news, in my opinion.
It's interesting as well. We're talking about closing the gap, but it also then opens up new ones. In terms of competitiveness from a country perspective, South Africa obviously has an opportunity, if we do things in the correct manner, to get a competitive advantage in the global marketplace. But if you look at competitive advantage and challenges, for example, the challenges that America was having with China, in particular with Huawei, which was blazing speeds, and developing the biggest and best digital technologies in the world, and of course was pulling China along with it, or vice versa. The aspect that was being raised then was that of security. And if we talk 4IR, we talk smart city, Internet of Things, there's a lot of data that's being captured, and the competitiveness of the country, the opportunities that the country is developing for itself resides in that data. How secure is that data in the opportunities that we are actually looking at? We're trying to close gaps using technology, but perhaps we are creating other risks in that pursuit.
Agreed. Devesh, I think two perspectives to that. One is really, I think we really need to choose the battles that are worth fighting for. For example, in terms of when we talk about technology, obviously there is a hardware component to it, right? In terms of all your switches, electronics, chips that goes into there. Are we going to position ourselves as a player, as a manufacturer of those components or innovation? It is very difficult. It's not a global game. It's concentrated on a few markets, China being the leading one, because it's a matter of volume. It is just a matter of volume. You need to have global volumes to achieve your cost point. So is it worth fighting to be a chip manufacturer or a telecom equipment manufacturer? Are we going to succeed in that? Probably not, because not many countries are contesting in this, because again, it's a volume and cost is a direct, how you create a market. It's not worth fighting. So what you do then is really more on how you create value in software applications, services. Services even from a professional services point of view, going in there. I think those are the contestable areas today, because as you said, not even the developed markets, they still have some of these gaps that we are suffering from as well. It's not like everywhere is covered and connected. So we are, yes, a bit behind, but again, it's a gap that we can close and leapfrog again if we choose the battles carefully. So in terms of data sovereignty, it is quite important, because at the end of the day, data is the new currency. So first of all, there should be frameworks, and again, there are many countries that are coming with data protection laws and whatsoever, particularly in terms of sensitive data, all the way from banking type consumer information to other protection of personal information, POPI Acts, and whatsoever, as we know in recent years, is emerging. I think they are very positive trends. I think the question is, are we able to implement it properly and govern it properly? Because still, historically, most of the data, especially use of cloud, resulted in most of this data sitting elsewhere, because we didn't have Amazon data center on the continent or Microsoft data center on the continent. So most of the previously cloud hosted kind of data used to sit in Ireland or UK or elsewhere. Now, I mean, this infrastructure is developing on the continent. There are lots of data centers coming up, and it enables, obviously, store and process that data locally. So we didn't need to move more in ensuring some of those acts and regulations are enforced and implemented properly, and protect our sensitive data from a national point of view. But by doing that, it is a balance, because at the end of the day, if you are too restrictive, you are sometimes blocking some of the developmental aspects, because certain things do require a bit more flexibility. Hence, I mean, it requires a bit of fine-tuning in terms of what is essential, what is critical and strategic importance, and what is not, and then enforcing it. And more importantly, I guess, I mean, beyond that protection and data ownership and rights, how we enable an environment of data mining and data processing to value add to the businesses, right? And there again, I mean, you will find, I mean, you'll be surprised the amount of startups in the country, on the continent. There are many. And there are many companies who are moving to data analytics and data processing. I think it's a bit of time awareness, adapt, and some things are being pushed. For example, I mean, if you look into again, with the impact of COVID and all, what's happening on the financial sectors, banking. We have seen digital banks coming up with no infrastructure, more based on user spend patterns or behavioral patterns. I mean, using that data and all, even from insurance companies. I mean, there is a lot of movement over there. Again, challenging and really disrupting traditional business models. There are lots of startups as well. I think the problem that they are facing is scalability and investment. Unfortunately, I think, I mean, we are still not mature in terms of venture capital, where, early stage investments. There are, various investors in this space, particularly in South Africa, but with, again, comparing to potential and the required investment, looking into Silicon Valleys and whatsoever, I mean, we are still way smaller from an investment point of view for early stage ventures. I think if we are to kind of bridge that gap and find means to encourage more early stage investments to these ventures, that's how we can leverage the data and the opportunity it represents. So I don't think.
Sorry, yeah.
No, I mean, just to conclude, I don't think there's a lack of interest and entrepreneurs over there. I think there are plenty. The problem is access to seed funding, venture capital, and scaling up before their competitors, because it's an arena contested globally. It's not a local game only.
The data centers that are emerging in Africa, are they mostly private, or are they those? I don't know whether you call them public or they are those that are used by everyone.
Yeah, I mean, co-location data centers, mostly they are independently run and not associated with operators or certain organizations. We have seen quite a lot of investment going on that independent data centers, or as often called carrier neutral data centers. And we see quite a lot of investment going over there, like Terracos over here, main ones in Nigeria, Icolos in Kenya, and whatsoever. I mean, there are quite a few data centers over there being invested by independent parties, and it's open for everyone to come and collocate colocation data centers. But at the same time, I mean, we also see slowly but surely arrival of these hyperscalers, like Amazon's, Microsoft's. They are establishing their own data centers as well. And I mean, when I say own data center, it is pretty much what's inside a data center. Often they get into arrangements with facility type of companies who would provide them with a building, electricity, cooling, power, security, but they will run anything inside the data center from a racks service point of view. But in recent years, we have seen Microsoft establishing its own data center in South Africa. Amazon is also. So I mean, there is hyperscalers plus this independence, and historically, I mean, most of these data centers, larger ones, were on the hands of network operators. But again, I mean, in line with these trends and infrastructure sharing, I think most of the network operators are also considering what to do with their data centers, because they don't need it anymore. They can, their requirements are getting smaller in terms of the space. Or it is more viable to host on an independent data center because it's not their core experience. So probably we will see some of those data centers getting on the hands of independent data center operators as well.
Just in terms of when we speak about lots and lots of data centers and data obviously being populated onto those infrastructure, you have the opportunity of artificial intelligence systems coming into play. From a business perspective, it gives opportunities for developers of AI technology. From an academic perspective, there's a lot of formalized training in the space of artificial intelligence at universities in particular. And also, though, there is some threat in that AI could possibly replace some jobs that are currently done by humans. Could you maybe look at what are some of the opportunities in the AI space as well as the threats that might actually come with it?
Devesh, I think it's completely on our hands because at the end of the day, there is one thing that is certain. I mean, this technology trends and efficiencies that it enables through automation and use of AI. I mean, you are not going to stop it. I mean, regardless, whatever, you can dig your heels down or you can try whatever it is going to happen. It's happening because, at the end of the day, it is a free market dynamics. If it's something more efficient, more productive, that is the direction that is gonna go. I mean, at the end of the day, water flows downwards, and there's nothing you can do to turn it around. So, I mean, it's gonna happen. And what it means is, yes, is it going to result in some of the jobs being replaced by machines? Probably yes. Now the question is then how we protect those jobs, how we prepare ourselves on these trends is really skilling up ourselves in these digital trends to be on the other side, because at the end of the day, again, all this AI developments and new automation opens up lots of other opportunities. And again, I mean, use of software, use of data analytics, use of systems that is running on that AI are the new opportunities. Indeed, again, I mean, if we are to lead in there, if we are to not lead, but be a player in there, right? I mean, then the opportunities are global, not limited to your local environment. So we really need to grow in there and become a global competitor over there beyond our borders to be able to reskill and restructure our current workforce to enable those trends. Again, it comes back to proper planning, education, and investment in that area, and enabling that investment environment in the country from a more macroeconomic global point of view. So if we don't, then we can cry and drag our feet and whatsoever. It's just that we will be on the losing end.
I guess when one mentions artificial intelligence, the picture that comes to mind for me is that of the Terminator movies, where the computers, they took over the world and then they decide to wipe out humanity. But I guess we also safe in that Eskom switches off the lights without any AI. So for AI to come in now and switch the lights back on, it's a bonus. Bora, I would like you to maybe also share with the guests and the listeners, rather, and some of the people watching our show, your contact information and where they can get a hold of you if they want to actually get more advice, and some of the if you can give us some of the services as well that Digitalthings actually offers.
Thank you, Devesh. I mean, Digitalthings is a boutique advisory and strategy and investment focus advisory firm within the telecommunication, media, and technology industry, and we operate in Africa. And what we do is we are pretty much on, as I said, investment and strategy side of the things. We work with investors into digital environment, everything from digital infrastructure, data centers, fiber networks, mobile networks, towers, whatever goes into digital infrastructure, and investors of it from a private equity point of view, banks who are lending money to these projects and other developmental funds. I mean, we work with all those investor groups, advising them in terms of analyzing the projects that they are looking to invest in from a technical, commercial, regulatory point of view, identifying risks and mitigations against that. And throughout the investment and post-investment stage, also we work with them to ensure their investments are deployed by the borrowers or invested companies as per the intended purpose. So we act as lenders, technical advisor, or independent technical advisors roles on development of digital projects. And we also work on the operator side, who are indeed looking to divest their product portfolio strategies or geographic reach, help them develop their business plans, they develop their strategies. Again, I mean, this is a very dynamic environment, as we said, and operators are often faced with the pressure of changing their products, their business models, digitizing their own businesses. So we do advise them in all those aspects, from strategy, business plan development, process and transitional digitization projects, and project management of those. So those are the key activities that we undertake on the continent in our practice. And again, I mean, I'll be keen to discuss with any interested listener if there is any interest on how we can assist them. Our contact details, first of all, I mean, our website is www.digitalthings.co.za. And our contact details, you can send us emails at info@digitalthings.co.za. Also, our phone number is +27 11 083 8038.
And you have a social media presence, right?
Correct. I mean, you will find us on LinkedIn, Twitter. On Twitter is DigitalThingsX is our hashtag contact detail, and on LinkedIn you can find us as well as company Digitalthings.
Do we still have some more time, Sam, for one more question?
Yeah,
Absolutely,
sure.
But there's this thing around, the government has been trying to establish digital schools. And they have been for many years. Are you able to talk to the challenges around that?
Yeah, I guess yes. I mean, the challenges are really again in twofold. On the supply side, I think the issues are less problematic because today really, I mean, through LTE coverage, fiber coverage, most schools are being fibered up, and there is also SA Connect project which is aiming to even expand that reach. So there are some programs going on the supply side to ensure all the schools are connected. But again, I mean, my view on that is not only the number of schools connected is the starting point. We really need to start with today. I mean, students, if they are doing online schooling, they are not, they don't need a connectivity in the school. They need a connectivity in their homes or wherever they are living at. So how do we ensure that connectivity to communities and make sure they are able to reach good quality broadband? This is starting point number one. Second is content and the platforms that are being used for delivery of digital education. Because I mean that content has to be really carefully crafted, carefully developed to ensure distance online learning and enable interaction, decent interaction. Because at the end of the day, depending on wherever you are in the grade point of view, you will have different requirements. On an earlier age, you still need to have more interaction, so you don't want to speak to a robot or just watch a video or whatsoever. You still need to enable that teacher-student interaction. How we enable that? I mean, that comes up with decent planning of education service providers, teachers, from availability and accessibility point of view. So we also need to armor the teachers and service provider with decent tools and connectivity and platforms that they are able to use in delivering their content. And again, I mean, that is within itself is a big project in my opinion. And the third thing is really soft skills, because teaching from a computer is different than teaching in a classroom. And that requires quite a lot of education and training from a teacher's point of view. So at the moment, and obviously then the end user devices, right? I mean, you need to have tablets, laptops, whatever that they need to use to utilize on that online education. At the moment, I think the focus is really just on the connectivity, a little bit on the content, but not in a complicated manner. It really leaves out all the aspects of training and interactive education aspects to ensure a quality education. So those are the areas I think they should be more prioritized. And again, I mean, connectivity point of view, we shouldn't just look at the number of schools, but we really need to look into where is the students, where are the students, are those areas connected, how do we ensure that connectivity, and so that, I mean, they can indeed leverage from an online education. Otherwise, I mean, connecting the schools, in my opinion, is just very short-sighted target.
I think also just to add, Bora, to what George was asking, of course, you would be aware as well, a lot of the projects that were looking at digitizing and bringing, not only closing digital divide, but bringing opportunities to schools, government institutions, as well as the greater public. Corruption obviously does fit in, and like you're saying, the end or last mile connectivity programs that have been in the country ended up being Wi-Fi hotspots, and they're working today, they're not working tomorrow. Or you find the kids huddling around a bus station, for example, because there's free Wi-Fi there, and no one is monitoring, like you've said in the show, the content provision, the effectiveness of the platforms going out hasn't really been fully thought of when we're rolling out these projects. Unfortunately, the ugly head of corruption also plays a huge role in what we've been talking about tonight, and it's very difficult to manage. Other than if we really focus on what you've also said in the show, to be able to see what is it you want to achieve, and where we are at the moment and how we could move forward, and defining for ourselves what smart city would look like for us, not copy what else has been done everywhere else in the world or in other successful projects. That in itself, through a policy perspective as well, we could address the issue of the corruption ending up not materializing into meaningful projects like digital schools, like SA Connect as well. Like even the BVI fiber rollout, government gets involved in these things, and at the end of the day, you don't really see the value coming out at the end because you haven't defined upfront what is it you want to get and how you're going to get there. You just run off, spend money or throw money at the issue, and when there's a big pile of money which the digital industry always asks for, then corruption usually follows suit. I just also wanted to thank you, Bora, for the opportunity to hear some of your views as well as your expertise in this area of telecommunications and digital. And I also wanted to encourage the listeners and viewers to drop their inputs as well. You've given the listeners your contact information, but they can also drop it in at the call center at COMETSA-GOC. That's COMETSA-GOC.com. And our website as well for COMETSA, COMETSA-GOC.com. And also don't forget to listen again to our show, which takes place every first Thursday of the month, from 1800 until 2000 hours. And we would be looking again at other industry sectors, and perhaps we might even ask Bora again to come again on one of the other shows, and we can unpack some of the other areas that he had highlighted.
Great. Thank you very much. This was beautiful conversation and very insightful indeed. I agree with you, Devesh, that it's just the beginning, and I think we must sustain this conversation at this level, because as Bora has indicated, that the change in this industry is very, and we don't want to be left behind. So it's really the way to go forward. I'm going to ask you to remain in the studio as we're saying goodbye to our viewers and listeners. I would like us to do a 10 minutes post view of what we have discussed, which will be a nice takeaway for Bora. And otherwise, let's say goodbye to our viewers.